Night after night the name Atlantis drifts across our collective imagination like a half-remembered dream. It surfaces in children's picture books, in pulp magazines, in late-night documentaries that promise forbidden knowledge. Yet if you tear away the pop culture varnish, a single stubborn fact remains. Only one ancient author, Plato, ever wrote at length about this island empire. No Egyptian scribe, no Roman historian, no Babylonian astronomer preserved the tale. That silence unsettles us. If Atlantis was real, why did the rest of antiquity avert its eyes? And if it was fiction, why did Plato embed it so meticulously in a dialogue otherwise devoted to Socrates' very real philosophy? Plato's account appears in two works, Timaeus and Critias. There, the Athenian legislator Solon, a documented figure of the 6th century BCE, travels to Egypt and hears priests speak of a cataclysmic island power that once attacked prehistoric Athens. Solon returns, records the story, and dies before finishing it. A generation later his notes reach Plato's family and the philosopher incorporates them into a wider meditation on cosmic order, human pride, and the fragile boundary between gods and mortals. For centuries scholars dismissed those pages as allegory, a cautionary fable warning Athens not to repeat her own moments of imperial hubris. Yet Plato slips in details that feel gratuitous if all he wanted was a moral lesson. He tells us Atlantis was larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, that it lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, that its plain measured 3,000 stadia by 2, irrigated by canals laid out with surveyor's precision. He lists the islands or deposits, white, black, and red stone, its hot and cold springs, its abundance of elephants. He even assigns Atlantis a date, 9,000 years before Solon's visit, far deeper in time than any Greek myth usually dares to roam. An allegory rarely needs an engineering schematic. A parable need not pin itself to a prehistoric calendar. That tension between moral fable and eyewitness catalog is our first hook. It invites a question modern thinkers cannot resist. What if Plato's fiction preserves a shard of lost memory? We have, after all, watched other literary phantoms crawl into daylight. Before 1870, Troy was a synonym for make-believe. Then Heinrich Schliemann walked into northwestern Turkey with nothing but Homer's verses as a map and shoveled legend into fact. If Homer was half historian, might Plato be too? Opponents counter that Plato freely populated his dialogues with invented speeches. Why not invent a vanished continent? Yet the philosopher himself draws a sharp line. He labels many of Socrates' debates likely stories, invitations to contemplate ideals. Atlantis he brands history passed down by priests who understood the true reckoning of time. To lie outright on so technical a matter would have shattered the very credibility his philosophical project depended on. Philosophy, for Plato, was reason anchored in observation. False history would poison that well. And so the mystery endures, an island that may never have existed, recorded by a thinker who almost never fabricated facts. If Atlantis is fiction, it is fiction uniquely stitched into the fabric of genuine chronology, begging to be unpicked, thread by stubborn thread, until we know what is cloth and what is ghost. In the pages that follow, we will pull on those threads. We will test each geographic clue against the turning map of Earth, weigh every volcanic caldera, every submerged ruin, every circular lagoon that might echo concentric canals. We will measure myths against ice core data and satellite altimetry, letting science and story interrogate one another in the same breath Plato once drew. Perhaps the island will stay hidden, a caution forever voiced by a single pen. Or perhaps, like Troy, it is waiting for a new generation bold enough to dig where skepticism says nowhere. Either way, the quest begins here, with a riddle scrawled on the margins of Western thought. Was Atlantis a warning or a memory? You are invited to decide, but only after the evidence has spoken. The waves of time are whispering, lean closer. In the spring of 1868, a self-taught German polyglot named Heinrich Schliemann stepped onto the dusty ridges of Hizarlik in northwestern Turkey with 2 battered volumes of Homer tucked beneath his arm. To the academy he was an eccentric merchant chasing a mirage. To himself he was pursuing the single question that had haunted him since childhood. Did the Trojan War actually happen, or was it only poetry? For 2 millennia respectable scholars had answered poetry. Troy, they insisted, was a stage set for heroics, a literary hologram projected by Homer to dramatize rage, honor, and fate. The Iliad's catalogue of ships, rivers, and ramparts was therefore ornamental, precise only in its ability to move a listener's heart. Yet Schliemann treated every epithet as cartography. He made what today we would call a checklist of geographic markers. 2 flowing springs, one hot, one cold. A city windy and broad lavish, dominating the plain. A view of the Scamander River winding to the Hellespont. A tumulus for Achilles visible from the walls. Armed with Homer's coordinates and a stubborn refusal to let ridicule stall him, he hired local diggers, ordered trenches cut through centuries of soil, and on a June morning struck stone walls so massive they defied the idea of rustic shepherds. Within weeks he revealed gateways, bastions, courtyards, and charred rafters bearing silent witness to a long-forgotten siege. When he uncovered a hoard of beaten gold, Priam's treasure, he boasted, draping the diadem across his wife Sophia's head, the newspapers of London and Paris erupted. Myth had put on flesh. Why linger over this Victorian adventure? Because Schliemann's coup rewired our collective caution. If the intellectual bedrock of antiquity could misfile Troy as fiction, what other legends might simply be dossiers mislaid by time? Scholars who once smiled indulgently at Plato's Atlantis found themselves wondering whether the Athenian, like Homer, had woven personal memory around public fact. The Troy precedent birthed a new methodology: treat the text as evidence, extract its coordinates, walk the map until the earth either confesses or stays silent. From this moment forward, Atlantis became a solvable puzzle, not a philosopher's parable. Classicists began assembling their own Platonic checklist: concentric harbors, bridges piercing seawater moats, mountains rich in red, black, and white stone, elephants roaming fertile plains, an island lying beyond the Pillars of Heracles. The ancient name for Gibraltar, yet close enough to hurl ships against Athens. 24 primary markers, each as tangible as Homer's sandy Samois. Critics argued Schliemann's success was fluke, luck amplified by sensational journalism. But the tide had already turned. Arthur Evans marched to Crete and exhumed Knossos, illuminating the Minoan world. Leonard Woolley brushed desert winds from UR. The 20th century became a parade of diggers proving poets right. Myth, it seemed, was not an enemy of history, it was history wearing metaphor for armor, waiting for spades sharp enough to peel the plating away. Yet there is a darker corollary. Schliemann also exposed how easily evidence can be destroyed by enthusiasm. His zeal sliced through upper layers that held later, equally precious epics. Priam's treasure almost certainly belonged to a culture centuries earlier than Homer's war. The lesson for Atlantis hunters is sobering. A single reckless trench across a suspected concentric ruin could obliterate what little testimony 11,000 years may have left us. Troy teaches courage to search, but also patience to listen before we strike the ground. So the second chapter in our quest is an invitation to adopt Schliemann's audacity without inheriting his excess. Atlantis will not yield to armchair theorizing, yet neither will it survive bulldozer archaeology. We must replicate Homer's checklist strategy, but temper each pickaxe swing with sonar scans, ground-penetrating radar, and the slow courtesy of stratigraphy. Only then can we hope to coax out of limestone and silt the same confession Schliemann pried from his Arlic, that myth is sometimes memory, and memory, if handled carefully, can speak louder than skepticism. If Troy's ramparts could endure 3,000 years of war, weather, and doubt, perhaps another city, older still and drowned deeper, is waiting for its name to be spoken aloud in the right latitude. The Iliad offered 19 clues, Plato offers twice as many. As we step into Chapter 3, we will trace the most distinctive of them, the mysterious concentric geometry of Atlantis' capital, and test where on Earth such impossible rings might yet lie beneath ash, desert, or sea. The checklist is written, the spades are ready. The echo of Schliemann's first hammerstroke urges us forward. Stand on any sea cliff at dusk and watch the tide carve crescent after crescent into the sand. You will glimpse, in miniature, the silhouette Plato drew for Atlantis. He speaks of a central hill crowned by a temple wrapped in a wide canal of seawater, then by a ring of land planted with orchards, followed by yet another moat, another ring, another moat, 5 circles in all, 3 of water and 2 of earth. Linked to the ocean by a straight channel 100 feet wide, 100 feet deep. No Greek city matched that pattern, no Egyptian nome, no Babylonian stronghold, no Phoenician harbor. If the description were allegory, why not choose a shape Athenians actually knew? The first hurdle for modern investigators is scale. Convert Plato's stadia and you obtain a capital roughly 12 kilometers across. A structure that size, bulldozed overnight by tsunami, should still emboss Earth's skin like the ghost of a giant fingerprint. So the new checklist begins. 5 concentric rings visible in terrain or bathymetry. A man-made canal slicing southward. Evidence of quarrying in white, red, and black stone. Hot and cold springs in close proximity, geothermal anomaly. Fossilized or subfossilized remains of elephants, Atlantis's cavalry beasts. Only a handful of locations tick even 2 items. Let us tour the short list. Santorini's blown-open caldera. The postcard beauty of Thera, whitewashed cottages cascading into a half-moon of cobalt sea, owes its shape to a Bronze Age supereruption. Seen from the air, the caldera offers a dramatic bowl, its inner rim almost perfect. Early 20th century scholars leapt upon the likeness, ring city found. But caldera is one ring, not five. The alleged canals are absent, the island sits inside the Mediterranean, not beyond the pillars. And radiocarbon dates, ca 1600 BCE, clash with Plato's far older timeline. Santorini shows how an evocative geometry can mislead by resemblance, a caution we must keep in mind. The Richat Structure, Eye of Africa. Satellite images of Mauritania reveal a vast bullseye, 42 kilometers of nested sandstone ridges eroded into concentric ovals. From orbit it screams Atlantis, outer ring, inner valleys, a breach to the southwest that might once have opened to sea. Geologists assure us it formed by uplift and wind, not water. Archaeologists counter that tool-flaked stone litters its gullies, hinting at ancient human presence. Yet the structure's axis tilts southwest-northeast, not true north-south as Plato records, and no sluice scar leads to Atlantic marshlands. The suspected canal is a mere dry wadi. Crucially, decades of surveys have yielded no megalithic foundations, no quays, no streets, no temple footprint large enough to house a navy. Doñana mudflats, southern Spain. 200 kilometers inland, ground-penetrating radar pierced the marsh and mapped circular wall signatures, 3 rings, not 5, buried under meters of silt. Could a tsunami have hurled seawater this far, drowning a maritime power then sealing it in riverborne clay? Ceramic shards and copper traces suggest advanced metallurgy, echoing Plato's orichalcum. Yet the rings stop at a radius of barely 2 kilometers, too cramped for a city that ruled half the Atlantic. Still, Spanish archaeologists have erected a replica monument at Cano Guerrero honoring a culture they suspect remembered Atlantis in miniature long after the original lay in ruins. Submerged harbors of Cadiz and Huelva. Beyond Gibraltar, sonar has mapped concentric breakwaters beneath storm-torn bays, stone arcs radiating outward like fossilized ripples. Roman engineers reused some berms, clouding provenance, dredged oak piles date to varying eras, none older than 800 BCE. The geometry could be coincidence, as currents scour soft seabeds, nested sandbars arise naturally. But pottery stamped with Phoenician glyphs suggests a trading station flourished here before classical Greece had yet minted coin. Perhaps Atlantis was never a single city but a federation of ring ports strung along Iberia's Atlantic rim, each copying an older sacred design whose mother site still sleeps farther seaward. Why the rings matter? Concentric architecture is not mere ornament. It encodes defense, multiple moats, control, gated bridges, and a cosmogram, a material mandala mirroring celestial spheres. By claiming Atlanteans lived inside such an earth-sky diagram, Plato elevates their hubris. They thought themselves masters of both maritime power and cosmic order. Locate a true five-ring metropolis and we confirm more than geography. We validate a worldview where city planning becomes theology, a concept echoed from Angkor Thom to Teotihuacan. Thus Chapter 3 leaves us on the threshold. The blueprint exists, fragments of it recur across oceans, but the full pattern hides. In Chapter 4 we will probe Santorini and the Minoan enigma, the first civilization advanced enough and doomed enough to wear the ringed crown, asking whether their island palace was inspiration, imitation, or the ashes of Atlantis itself. Fly above the Aegean on a cloudless afternoon and you will see it, a broken ring of pumice-white cliffs encircling cobalt water like the shattered rim of some celestial chalice. This is Santorini Thera, what remains of a mountain that, for millennia ago, blew its heart into the stratosphere, sent tsunamis lashing Crete, and dimmed sunsets from China to the Arctic. Long before scholars coined the term supereruption, villagers whispered that Atlantis lay here, drowned in its own caldera. On first inspection the theory dazzles, a maritime culture, advanced plumbing, bull-leaping frescoes, sudden destruction by fire and sea, a stage-perfect rehearsal of Plato's cataclysm. Urban sophistication, excavations at Akrotiri reveal multi-story houses with light wells, indoor toilets, and frescoes that rival Renaissance palette work. Plato's Atlantis glitters with similar civil engineering brilliance. Merchant navy reach, Minoan ceramics surface from Syria to Sicily, proof of a thalassocracy confident enough to challenge nascent mainland powers, exactly the strategic arrogance Plato assigns to his island empire. Volcanic obliteration. Tephra layers confirm an eruption circa 1600 BCE that rained ash on Egypt and may have spawned tidal waves tall enough to tear open the Cyclades ring city. In a single night and a day, the island sank beneath the sea, Plato writes. Thera offers geology that can make such poetry literal. Add to this the mythic echo in Greek memory, Hesiod's Island of the Blessed, Herodotus's dim rumors of a pre-Hellenic mariners' league, even the bull iconography that drifts from Gnosis into Platonic symbolism. The argument almost sells itself. Yet the closer we press, the more the mirror distorts. Where are the rings? Thera's caldera is a single crescent, not the 5 disciplined circles Plato itemizes. Erosion can erase walls, but it cannot conjure extra moats. Wrong ocean, wrong gate, the Aegean lies inside the pillars of Heracles, not beyond them. For a Greek audience, those columns at Gibraltar marked the edge of the world. Locating Atlantis in waters every fisherman knew would neuter Plato's rhetorical power. Chronology clash. Ice core sulfate spikes and tree-ring frost scars pin Thera's blast to roughly 1600 BCE. Plato, via Solon, via Egypt, places Atlantis 9,000 years before his own 5th century milieu, a gulf no clever recalibration of Egyptian lunar calendars can close without contortion. Scale problem. Even at its zenith, Minoan Thera was a compact entrepot. Plato grants Atlantis a plain 3,000 stadia wide, about the area of modern London, inundated by a canal grid fit for a continental breadbasket. Thera could never have fed, much less fielded, elephants. These contradictions suggest an intriguing middle path, Thera as prototype, not proof. Imagine Solon in Egypt hearing priests recount 2 stories, the smoke-dark memories of a volcanic apocalypse in the Mediterranean and an even older saga of an Atlantic colony wiped out by cosmic flood. Over centuries the accounts braid, details of one bleed into the canvas of the other. When Plato inherits the tapestry, he embroiders geometry and ethics onto it, producing the synthesis we read today. In that model, Minoan splendor supplies Atlantis with everyday color, the frescoed palaces, the worship of bulls, the hegemony of sea lanes, while an entirely separate landmass provides the true geographic skeleton. Whether or not it is Atlantis, Thera gives the investigation 3 invaluable lessons. Civilization can evaporate overnight, pumice rafts the size of provinces drifted for years, harbors silted, trade dominoed into collapse. Catastrophe on Plato's scale requires no science fiction, just a caldera and an unlucky dawn. Myth preserves shockwaves. The Greek word for ash survives in folk lullabies, legends of a sun-turned blood-red echo in Hittite annals. Oral memory can ferry geological trauma across millennia. Ash is an archive under meters of rhyolitic dust, wall paintings froze court life mid-gesture. The very violence that erased Akrotiri also embalmed it. If Atlantis lies elsewhere, a similar matrix, sand, silt, or salt may have protected its foundations, waiting for sonar to trace their edges. So Santorini exits are shortlisted, neither crowned nor discarded, but reframed, a crucial control sample demonstrating how nature can sculpt island tragedy into cultural myth. In Chapter 5 we sail west, beyond Gibraltar, to follow Plato's explicit compass bearing into the Atlantic littoral where Spain meets Morocco and the Sahara slides under the surf. There the map grows stranger, desert eyes that look like water rings, mudflats that hide concentric ghosts, and seabeds studded with volcanoes dormant since the last ice melts. If Atlantis exists, logic insists it must surface, figuratively or literally, on those margins. Santorini has shown us the explosion, the pillars now beckon us toward the vanished empire such an explosion might have erased. Hear the hiss of surf wrapping the rocks at Gibraltar, the world's edge in Bronze Age mines. Saltwind, gull cry, a strait only 14 kilometers wide, yet for the Greeks it was cosmic distance. Beyond those pillars everything blurred into rumor. Step with me onto the western swell. Feel the deck tilt, hear the timbers creak. We cruise north, hugging Iberia's curve, searching for a coastline that once bore a ringed capital like a crown. Now the audio dissolves into desert wind. Sand moves the way water once did. Mauritania sleeps under a harsh noon, but from orbit the eye of Africa stares back. Rings of stone, rings of silence, 40 kilometers across. Geologists whisper uplift, erosion, anticline. Still, the pattern jolts the subconscious. Center, moat, land, the blueprint Plato etched. Yet walk the ridges and there are no wharves, no quays, no cut basalt blocks. Just shards of Neolithic spearheads and the bones of pastoral elephants bleached to ivory dust. A mirage in limestone, compelling, unfinished, lacking the hum of a vanished city. Fades shift the soundscape to sucking marsh, frogs, the far bark of a Spanish fox. Doñana, Andalusia. Ground-penetrating radar fires pulses into the mud and echoes come back as perfect arcs, 3 concentric walls buried beneath estuarine silt. The Guadalquivir Delta was once a broad brackish gulf. A tidal bore could have surged inward, collapsed adobe, entombed memories beneath layers of clay so oxygen-starved even would survives. But the arcs measure barely 2 kilometers across. Atlantis in miniature, a votive model, or a refugee settlement commemorating a homeland drowned farther out at sea. Archaeologists lift fragments, copper slag, a stylized trident in orichalcum alloy, a sherd incised with 2 elephants trunk to trunk like mirrored moons. Hints, not verdicts. We sail again. Seabed sonars paint scrolling blue-green screens. Off the Bay of Critias, concentric breakwaters emerge in the acoustic gloom, half-circles of dressed stone, intervals precise, as though an ancient harbor architect copied celestial epicycles onto water. Carbon from buried oak piles mutters a date, 900 BCE Phoenician. Too late for Plato's tale, yet the geometry persists like a hereditary memory. Cultures repeat sacred forms long after the origin myth turns to vapor. The narration drops into low register, almost a confession. Maybe Atlantis was never one city but a style, a code etched into the Western mind, rings to honor cosmic harmony, canals to echo the Milky Way's silver braid. Each port along the Atlantic facade could be a bead on a broken necklace, the central gem lost beneath younger waves. Listen, distant thunder that is not thunder. 12,800 years ago, fragments of a disintegrating comet ignite the sky. Shockwaves hammer coastlines, ice dams shatter, oceans heave. Picture the tsunami rolling through this very strait, funneling into river valleys, backwashing into marshes that will become Doñana. Picture fleets splintered against limestone capes, watchtowers blinking once, then drowned. Morning after, smoke erases the horizon, dusk arrives without noon, stars are veiled for a generation. In that darkness, survivors tell children about a ringed kingdom swallowed in a single night and a day. The children grow, migrate, build harbors that curve like memories, and when at last Solon reaches Egypt, the priests recite a story already 9,000 years old. The ship's bell tolls. Dawn over the mid-Atlantic. Charts twitch with seamount chains, Ampere, Josephine, Atlantis Massif itself, all volcanic plateaus that once touched air during lower seas. If one bore a city, it sleeps now under 2 kilometers of water, safe from every spade but not from sonar or remotely operated lights. We drift in the swell, engines idle. The narrator's voice softens, the checklist is almost complete, rings, elephants, red, white, black stone, the fatal flood. Yet proof slides like fish beneath the keel. Perhaps the next ping will trace foundations across the abyssal plain. Perhaps nothing remains but mythology's echo. Either way, the ocean keeps its counsel, and we, ears full of wind and prophecy, set course for the seamounts, chasing a silhouette drawn by a philosopher who insisted he was writing history. Hold that note, let the water breathe, chapter closes in the hush between sonar pulses. Static pops, now a campfire in the Mauritanian dusk, research tents glowing ember orange. A geologist chips quartz that glitters red, white, black beneath her headlamp, Plato's palette in the palm of her hand. Nearby, paleontologists dust the eroded jaw of an elephant far from any modern waterhole. The radio squawks, core sample confirms hydrothermal vents once bubbled here, hot spring, cold spring side by side, another line ticked on the checklist. And yet the bigger boxes stay empty. No harbor stones, no shattered columns, just wind carving soft sandstone into false ramparts. Somewhere a camel bell clanks like an unanswered question. Fade. Low hum of a cargo drone gliding over Greenland's ice sheet. Instruments aim down through 2 kilometers of frozen history to the shadow of a 31-kilometer scar, Hiawatha. Probe returns microtectites, glass speeds born in cosmic fire. Lab dates swarm round 12,800 years ago, same moment mammoths disappear, same moment sea levels spasm. Composer adds distant heartbeat drums, boom boom, boom boom, Younger Dryas beats against the narrative like surf. Voiceover whispers, a comet's shrapnel could light the skies, shatter ice dams, launch ocean swells that leap continents. Picture those waves reaching the mid-Atlantic plateaus, Ampere, Cruiser, Atlantis Massif, washing ring walls clean, then dropping 50 meters of silt as they retreat. Proof erased by water doing what water always does, forget. Quick crossfade, arid plain in western Spain, drone swings low over Canon Guerrero. In the dust stands a circular man-made mound, diameter 70 meters, moats hinted by dried reed beds. Archaeologists cluster round a stone stele at the entrance, warrior carved in low relief, holding an impossibly long sword. Subbase thrum, ground radar reveals molybdenum, copper, traces of electrum plating. The glyph on the floor, Egyptian symbol for metal purification, flashes under ultraviolet, echoes Plato's sentence, they valued orichalcum next after gold. The camera swoops over the miniature city layout, center plinth, 2 ring roads, outer berm, 3-ring votive to a 5-ring ancestor. Voiceover, perhaps survivors fled the drowning and built memory shrines inland, carving the plan small enough to travel in the mind. Music hushes only breath and distant cicadas. Narrator, maybe Atlantis is everywhere evidence of cataclysm intersects evidence of genius. Cue montage, underwater pillars off Yonaguni, stepped pyramids in the Gulf of Cambay, megalithic blocks at Bimini Road, all half-lit by ROV spotlights, all wearing the same marine patina, all chronologically homeless. A cello note bends upward into silence. The argument hangs, one global civilization or many cultures solving stone in parallel. The checklist can't answer, it only prods the puzzle. Soft crack of a match, flame flares, illuminates pages of Timaeus fluttering on a research table. Scholar's finger underlines a forgotten clause, Atlantis possessed, a plain sheltered by mountains to the north, open to warm southern winds. Map overlay glows, satellite topography of the Azores Plateau shows shield volcanoes girdling a sunken meadow 400 kilometers wide. But it lies 3,000 meters down. Next cut. Unmanned submersible descending into midnight blue, sonar pinging concentric ridges on the flank of the Horseshoe Seamount. Operator's voice tight on the comms, if those are terrace walls we're photographing history before history. Audio narrows to a single inhalation. Narrator speaks almost to himself, proof may sleep deeper than light. Yet the story keeps surfacing, in rings, in metals, in myths of a golden age that drowned. Either humanity suffers collective déjà vu or we remember something real. Wind rises, rattling tent canvas, drowning the thought. Final image for this stream, dawn over the Atlantic, water the color of molten pewter. The ship's bow points toward empty coordinates etched on a weather-stained clipboard. Crew-ready ROV cables, coffee steams in cold air, gulls circle like commas waiting for the next clause. Voice, steady now, the checklist isn't finished. The ocean hasn't spoken its last line. Fade to the low churn of engines, steady, determined, then silence. White noise, ocean hiss, and the deck cam reels us farther west, following Plato's compass like a heartbeat. 70 hours from Spain, the water beneath us things on sonar, the captain circles a blur the geologists insist is the mid-Atlantic ridge dressed as a plateau. Azores sunrise, sulfur warm. Steam vents ripple air above sea level, volcanoes still breathing after 12 millennia of exile. Drop the ROV. Descent begins, motors whirring, lights carving cones in pelagic ink. At 900 meters a terrace appears, broad, level, step twice like masonry left half-quarried. Is it basalt cooling in neat prisms or wall foundations plumbed by drowned surveyors? Cameras tilt, a notch runs straight as an arrow toward the abyssal plain. Over comms somebody whispers, Southcut Canal? Another voice fires back, thermal contraction crack. Science and legend volley in the dark. ROV pushes deeper. Silt plumes. A boulder looms, face fractured, but the fracture lines meet at right angles, nature dislikes right angles. The laser grid flickers, measuring, 2 by 3 meters. Granite? No, gabbro flecked with something bright. Sample claw snaps off a shard, floodlights catch a vein that glows rose copper. Orichalcum myth travels well, it seems. Surface lab scrapes corrosion, runs XRF, copper, zinc, trace tin, ancient brass, but alloyed oddly rich like Mesoamerican Tumbaga or Cypriot bloom. Metallurgist mutters, pre-industrial, maybe antediluvian. Navigator logs coordinates, tags the boulder, alpha, wall, 01. Checklist expands by one trembling tick. Now cut to a core extracted from the seafloor, layer cake of epics. At 11,600 years ago, a surge of microtektites, pollen burned to soot, a spike in platinum and iridium, signature of the Younger Dryas firestorm. Above it, carbonate mud lightens, meaning seas warmed, glaciers bled, coastlines redrew the atlas. Picture each meter of core as a drumbeat, boom, impact, boom, meltwater pulse, boom, continental shelf slipping underwater. If Atlantis perched on the Azores Plateau's shoulders, the sea would have climbed 40 meters in a human lifetime, drowning temples faster than priests could evacuate scrolls. Audio crossfade, echo chamber of the Elephant Bones Cave on Flores Island, 600 kilometers southwest. Paleontologists unpack crates, molar fragments, femurs thick as oars. Proboscidean relatives thrived here late into the Pleistocene. Plato's elephants no longer feel like allegory, they are zoological data points, explaining the ivory he claims Atlanteans carved into spear inlays. Night on deck. Stars as noisy as sand against hull paint. Astrophysicist points toward the Taurid meteor stream, parent of the hypothetical comet that shattered into planet-scarring shards. Every June and November Earth plows through that rubble again, cosmic roulette forever spinning. Plato's reset clock, civilization erased every 5,000 years, might be folklore's way of pacing out these celestial intersections. Morning. Drone lifts, sprays sunlight across a submarine landslide scar on the great meteor seamount. Its scarp arcs like an inverted ring canal half a kilometer tall. Modelers feed its volume into fluid dynamics software, resulting wave height, 30 meters at Gibraltar, enough to swamp the coastal plains of Iberia and Morocco, enough to bulldoze a concentric city ring by ring. Narration slows to an intimate hush. Imagine families on polished quays, dawn market scents of saffron and elephant oil, hearing a rumble deeper than thunder. Water withdraws, fish flopping on wet marble. Then the horizon flexes upward, an oncoming wall that blots out the rising sun. One breath later, the island's memory enters world mythology as a caution carved into priestly tablets. We surface from the imagining. The shipboard scientists still quarrel. Geology says possible, archaeology wants artifacts. Yet for the first time the checklist stands at 2/3 complete. Rings, canal scar, tricolor stone, hot and cold vents, elephant remains, exotic alloy, impact horizon. Proof enough to keep the grants flowing, mystery enough to keep the story breathing. Engines idle, crew trade glances. Should we risk a submersible dive beneath 3,000 meters where sonar hints at a larger concentric anomaly? Costs soar, pressure kills. Decision deferred to dawn. The narrator exhales. In Plato's tale, hubris doomed Atlantis. In ours, restraint might save the evidence. Crossfade to silence broken only by rope creaking on porthole cleats. The ocean absorbs every question we shout into it, returns only salt wind. Somewhere under the swell an answer sleeps in basalt rooms. Whether it wears the Atlantean name or another, we will knock again in the next transmission. Hold frequency, listen for the echo. Low thrum of compressors, deck lights dim to red, pre-dawn on the research vessel feels like the hush before theater curtains rise. Over intercom the dive supervisor counts down. In the bay an acrylic sphere submersible bobs like a glass lung. You strap him beside a geochemist who smells faintly of coffee and adrenaline. Hatches seal, ballast vents hiss, and the sea swallows the craft with a muffled gulp. Depth meter scrolls 200 m, 600, 200, sunlight bleeds out, the world turns cobalt, then black satin. Pilot kills external floods, only instrument glow warms the cockpit. Hydrophones pick up whale clicks dopplering through miles of water, slow, planetary Morse, until even the whales fall silent. At 2940 m the pilot flares thrusters, easing onto a silt floor that billows like smoke. Here, sonar promised a wider circle, the possible mothering. You swing the lamp, a berm rises, gentle but geometrically precise, curving beyond beam range. The geochemist mutters, that's not volcanic. Crawler tracks forward. Cameras catch a line of rectangular voids, negative space where stone blocks once fit tongue and groove. The voids are perfectly repetitive, like missing teeth in a gear. The pilot angles lasers, spacing holds at 0.8 m center to center for 36 meters before curve hides the rest. Nature hates monotony, engineers crave it. Checklist addendum lights up on the tablet in your lap, regular foundation seating, tick. Something gleams where floodlight schemes the berm space. Arm extends, gripper plucks a disc no larger than a dinner plate crusted with manganese oxide. Rinse with onboard seawater jet. A pattern winks, spiral labyrinth inside a perfect circle, chased around the rim with dots of alloy still faintly golden. The symbol matches a seal impression taken last season at Canon Guerrero. 2 points on opposite coasts riffing the same geometry across 11 millennia of separation. Coincidence things. A second artifact juts from silt, column drum, 5 flutes visible, granite grain but peppered with foreign crystals, storolite, kyanite, minerals rare here, quarried maybe 1,000 kilometers south. Logistics on a drowned island? Either they hauled stone by flotilla or the cylinder rolled in after the wave. The pilot logs coordinates, releases a sonar ping that races outward, rebounds off more drums hidden under sediment. The circle is a colonnade collapsed outward, like a temple ripped from the center by centrifugal force. Sudden tremor, cameras wobble, silt clouds. The mid-Atlantic ridge is alive, hydrothermal vents toy with equilibrium. Pilot steadies attitude. For 6 heartbeats everyone holds breath, remembering Plato's last line, earthquakes, then deluge. When tremor subsides the cockpit feels smaller, history heavier. On the surface, the vessel's analysts see live feed, overlay GIS layers erupting crosstalk, depth matches meltwater pulse 1b. Sedimentation rate plausible for 9600 BCE. Run thorium isotope dating on the crust. Headlines already form in their eyes, but you catch the director's whisper in your headset, "No press yet." We're still one elephant short of certainty. Minutes later, the sub's lamp sweeps over a massive scapula half-buried at the berm's inner slope, a pachyderm the size of a mammoth, impossible this far from continental shelf unless land once bridged here. There's your elephant. The geochemist laughs, half joy, half disbelief, checklist complete. The pilot lets silence answer, data is rarely so considerate. Ascent begins. Hull creaks, ballast vents burble. Somewhere above, the ocean is already rewriting currents around tonight's disturbance, tucking relics back under drifting sand. Up top, dawn paints the horizon pewter rose. When the sub breaks surface, crew drag it aboard like a newborn truth still slick with myth. Debrief in the lab feels like a courtroom. Skeptics fire salvos, tectonic coincidence, subglacial dropstones, Pythias' lost colony, not Plato's, yet every doubt now requires a longer reach. Plates of orichalcum alloy, elephant bones in mid-ocean, a 5-kilometer ring foundation at exactly the depth predicted by Younger Dryas sea rise curves. Each fact alone is curious, braided, they resist dismissal. The director pins core photographs beside Plato's passage about crimson stone veins and hot-cold fountains. For the first time, text and geology handshake without flinching. Evening. Scientists sprawl on deck chairs, red wine sloshing against plastic cups, too wired to sleep. Someone quotes Timaeus in the original Greek, another counters with Graham Hancock, laughter vaults into star-clouded sky. Yet beneath the banter glows quiet awe because proof shifts duty onto the prover. Finding Atlantis doesn't end the story, it detonates new questions. Who mapped those rings with pre-satellite precision? What cosmology demanded concentric harmony? How did artisans smelt zinc-rich brass for millennia before the documented invention of zinc extraction? Most unnerving, if a comet reset the world once, what clock calls the next alignment? You lean on the rail, bioluminescent wakes write turquoise cursive across black water. Plato's ghost seems closer than the gulls. In his telling, the lesson was never masonry, it was humility stitched to cosmic memory. Tonight masonry is real. The humility is ours to learn or refuse. Engines rumble, the ship turns east, homeward, artifact cases strapped tight. Somewhere behind, basalt corridors echo with water and unfinished sentences. The ocean closes its lips, but for once it does not quite smile. Wind knocks the microphone, it sounds like distant surf, but we're 900 miles from any coast, anchored over the mid-Atlantic ridge. Lamps jitter, turning the deck into a planetarium of swaying shadows. Someone taps the satellite dish, static clears, and the data stream from Greenland's ice core flares across the screen. Tiny beads of glass, peaks of iridium, thin black stripes of soot stacked like barcode. 12,800 years ago the sky went to war with the earth. First the night brightened white, northern constellations vanished behind walls of flame. Comet fragments, half a kilometer wide, tore open the stratosphere, burst over Laurentide ice. Shock waves punched into permafrost, vaporized miles of glacier, hurled meltwater down drainage basins that did not yet have names. Think of Niagara Falls, now multiply its roar by 10 million and let it pour for months. Rivers reversed, seas bulged, coastlines blinked off maps that humans hadn't invented. Cut to mammoths in Siberia, steam billowing from their trunks as hail of molten rock tattoos the tundra. Cut to giant ground sloths in Patagonia sniffing ozone as air flash fries forest. Cut to Clovis hunters in what will become New Mexico watching the stars rain fire, unaware their spear tips mark the last sunrise of their culture. 70% of North America's megafauna folds in a geological heartbeat. Boneyards marinate in meltwater, within days scavengers run out of carcasses and turn on each other. Planetary reset button slammed. Camera pushes through gray ash into the Atlantic, glacier melt pulses across the ocean like liquid mountains, snaps conveyor currents, chills global climate 3, 4, 6 degrees. Summer vanishes for 13 centuries. Atlantis, if it existed, sits on an uplifted plateau now hammered by tsunamis, starved of sunlight, ringing with earthquakes as the crust rebounds from vanished ice mass. Picture 5 luminous canals funneling warm Gulf flow, now picture them reversed, a snarling river racing inland, cannibalizing walls, sluicing elephants into foaming dark. One night, one day, then nothing but moonlit surf rolling over a fresh trench. Back on deck the narrator's voice lowers, we've dragged proof into the lab. Platinum anomaly slides under electron microscope, microspherules show quench tails frozen at 20,000 degrees. Same chemical fingerprint in South Carolina soil, in Syrian desert loess, in Younger Dryas layer on 3 continents. The impact wasn't local, it was orchestral bass drums on every hemisphere. Legends echo it, Hopi speak of the snake people who set fire to the world. Zulu remember the sky spirit whose glowing children scorched the veldt. Greece keeps silent except for a single Athenian priest telling Solon a story about an island that dared the gods and drowned. Midnight now, ocean flat as oil. The ship's hull ticks as metal cools, crew nap in hammocks strung between shipping crates. You stand alone at the rail, ice core plot scrolling across your tablet, watching the temperature crash line arc toward present day. Behind the cold spike a civilization could disappear without leaving a single potsherd on land. Only on drowned terraces like the one we map today would masonry survive, stitched into salt and pressure. Tomorrow we lower courers into that silt, searching for a layer of charcoal matching the ash horizon in Greenland. If the dates lock, the checklist becomes a ledger. And the story Plato half-remembered becomes a case file, catastrophe, witnesses, motive. A meteor streaks overhead harmless this time, its reflection skimming black water like a silver blade. Somewhere in its tail is the same dust that murdered mammoths. You inhale cold air heavy with salt and wonder which is harder to fathom, that worlds can die overnight or that stories can keep them alive for 12,000 years waiting for sonar to finish the sentence. Wind rises across the marshlands of Andalusia, rustling cane like static on an old phonograph. Drones lift off pre-dawn, their rotors a swarm of hornets against violet sky. Below, the Doñana mudflats breathe, tidal lungs inhaling Atlantic brine, exhaling river silt. At low tide the plain glistens mirror flat, a perfect slate for ground-penetrating radar to scribble fluorescent hieroglyphs. The operator's voice crackles, sweep 3, marking anomaly. On the monitor a neon green arc blossoms, then another, wider, then a third, 3 rings nested like ripples captured mid-shiver. Depth, 5 meters. Diameter, 2 kilometers. The circles intersect a buried channel trending true south. Plato's blueprint, miniaturized. Cut to trowels slicing clay. Archaeologists kneel in trench walls that ooze black anaerobic mud smelling of salt and centuries. A ceramic shard lifts free, slick as eel skin, red slip, concentric stamp, elephant motif marching trunk to tail. Nearby, copper slag veins the soil, spectrometer pings elevated zinc. Orichalcum ghost. But Doñana's rings are small, domestic, and echo rather than an origin. Who echoes a drowned empire? Follow the Guadalquivir 50 kilometers inland where dusty pines guard a rise locals call Canon Guerrero. Midday sun bakes stone foundations into mirage, yet drone lidar peels cactus and scrub away, revealing a precise scale model of a concentric city, central plinth, twin moats, outer rampart. Pilgrims graffiti, Phoenician, early Latin, litter the approach as if generations came to honor a memory already ancient. Inside the inner ring, carved into quartzite, an Egyptian hieroglyph for metal refinement, beside it, a stylized labyrinth spiraling toward a dot. The motif matches the brass disc lifted from the seafloor 2 chapters ago. Somebody once stood here, pointing seaward, saying that's where the great city fell. Shrine, cenotaph, cautionary tale, pick a label, the stones don't mind. Night in the makeshift lab. UV lamps hum over artifacts, bronze fishhooks thick as thumbs, carnelian beads bored with micro-drills, a gold foil plaque etched with an angle-anchored grid that prefigures Greek geometry by millennia. Dating results land like drumbeats, carbon 12,400 BP plus or minus 120, thermoluminescence 12,600 BP plus or minus 180. Numbers skewer skepticism. These tools belong to a society flourishing the very decade ice cores say the sky burned and oceans rose. Flashback audio interview from the 1960s, Spanish farmer recalling stone circles swallowed by a freak tide in his childhood. Officials bulldozed a levee, buried the site. Tape hiss merges with present-day cicadas. Morning briefing on the marsh edge, satellite overlay fuses LiDAR rings with bathymetric trenching offshore. The channel from Doñana aligns with a drowned valley that meets the continental shelf exactly opposite yesterday's subfoundation. Imagine refugee flotillas clawing east as waves claimed their terraces, beaching on a virgin delta, rebuilding rings at 1/3 scale, then watching rivers silt them under across centuries. A civilization caught between tsunami and floodplain entropy. Team lead clicks a laser pointer. If Doñana is a refugee imprint, Canon Guerrero is cultic memory. That means the source city, our five-ring giant, still sits on the shelf break. Eyes track to a bathymetric map glowing ocean blue, an oval rise, 20 kilometers across, depth 150 m, well within dive range. Generator growls, winches rattle, ROV nicknamed Solon swings over water. One historian whispers, half joke, half prayer, third time's the charm, Santorini taught humility, Richat taught caution. Maybe Cutters gives us truth. As the drone descends, marsh reeds hiss like applause behind the departing ship. Seagulls wheel above the estuary, screaming a language older than empire. Camera pans back, concentric ghost lines shimmer beneath the low-tide shine, then vanish as water returns, tidal eraser resetting the slate for the next seeker. Rain drums the wheelhouse roof, soft, uneven, almost like static on an old vinyl. Inside, monitors glow with sonar feed from the Cadi's shelf, yet crew eyes drift to the philosopher standing by the chart table, chalk in hand. No hard hat, no dive log, just a tattered copy of Timaeus and a question that won't let him sleep. He taps the map once. Suppose the rings are real, suppose the dates lock. Then what? Silence answers, thicker than the diesel-scented air. He draws 4 columns on the whiteboard, whispers labels as if reading liturgy, origins. Consciousness. Catastrophe. Future. Fade to low strings, heartbeat tempo. Origins first. If bronze discs and zinc-rich alloys predate Sumer, our timeline buckles. Agriculture, smelting, geometry, they jump back thousands of years. Textbooks must rewrite Chapter 1, classrooms must admit civilization restarts like a stubborn engine, not a linear march. Consciousness next. Plato's claim that we are spirits remembering rather than bodies learning, once airy metaphysics, suddenly gains forensic muscle. If refugees of a comet-blasted empire carried star maps, ritual psychedelics, and a doctrine of soul survival into Egypt and Iberia, then hermetic maxims as above, so below become field notes, not aphorisms. Scholar flicks audio of an EEG lab, monks in deep trance produce gamma synchrony identical to DMT volunteers. Bridge-built, altered states as databanks, not daydreams. Catastrophe column, ice core graphs flash, Younger Dryas, 8.2 Ka event, 4.2 Ka arid pulse. Every 5 millennia the line jerks. Plato wasn't sermonizing, he was citing a pattern. Insurance analysts lean closer, coastal megacities cluster on shelves Atlantis deep. A projection slides, sea rise curve under worst-case melt. New York, Shanghai, Lagos tint crimson. Lessons unlearned retake the exam. Future column. The Taurid swarm returns in 2032 with a dense node of debris. Astronomers debate trajectory margins smaller than the width of this wheelhouse. Philosopher caps the marker, says nothing, the engine hum fills the void. If the past is prologue, preparedness is philosophy applied. Satellites, impact deflection, global seed vaults, suddenly not sci-fi but civic duty. Rain stops, a gull cries like chalk on slate. Why it matters? Because a drowned ring city proves memory is more durable than stone and warning labels can hide in myth. Because discovering an ancient reset forces a choice, archive the data and move on, or terraform culture, education, policy, worldview around the revelation. The ship rolls, coffee sloshes and mugs. Geologist breaks the hush, artifacts are cargo. Meaning is ballast. Heads nod. Somewhere below, RV lights sweep bronze-green darkness. Above, minds recalibrate orbit. A new age of reason rooted in sonar and legend seems possible if we let humility navigate. Lightning flickers on the horizon, brief as shutter flash. Philosopher snaps Timaeus shut. Atlantis isn't a city, he murmurs, it's a mirror. The reflection sharpens only when storm clouds gather. Engines power up, prow turns toward tomorrow's coordinates. Deck speakers crackle, all hands, prep for dive. Conversation pauses, work calls. Yet the 4 columns stay on the board, ink beating where raindrops found open window. Origins, consciousness, catastrophe, future. The stakes, spelled out in black marker and Atlantic drizzle, refuse to wash away. Projector whirs, the only sound in a darkened auditorium packed wall-to-wall with scientists, journalists, philosophers, 3 heads of state, and a lone monk in saffron robes. On screen, side-by-side images, sonar rings from the Cadi's shelf, LiDAR rings at Doñana, basalt wall joints 3 kilometers down, brass disc spiraling inward, ice core iridium spike. A single caption blinks, convergence. No podium tonight, just a circular stage mirroring those drowned motes. Lead geologist steps into the halo of light, speaks without notes. 5 teams, for continents, 1 dataset. Stratigraphy, metallurgy, paleontology, epigraphy, each discipline points to an event at 12,600 plus or minus 200 BP. What we called Atlantis is no longer a hypothesis. It is an archaeological horizon stretching from Iberia to the mid-Atlantic plateau, punctuated by geomorphic scars and cultural echoes. The city itself is only the densest knot in a larger weave. He gestures, the screen fractures into a honeycomb of live feeds, RV stills, marsh trenches, Greenland lab benches, astronomical simulations of Taurid nodes. Voices cascade, carbon date technicians, comet model physicists, linguists mapping labyrinth glyphs from Kutas to Crete to Tiwanaku. The monk quotes a 5th century Tibetan chronicle describing Island of the Five Waters. Murmur spreads, skeptics ready questions. Enter the philosopher, chalk dust still on his sleeves. He draws an invisible ring with his finger, stops at the audience. Evidence assembled is only half the work. Tonight we fuse it with memory. Slide changes, flood myths plotted on a world map, Mesopotamia, Maya, Maori, Dogon, Norse, all pinned to sea level inflection points. Next slide, architectural concentricity, Mohenjo-Daro water grids, Angkor Thom's moats, Incan terracing that spirals down Andean slopes. Independent invention? He asks. Or survivors distributing a blueprint they deemed sacred? Survey archaeologist chimes in via satellite from the Azores deck, salty hair whipping in wind, subfoundation beta radiocarbon, 12550 BP, copper zinc alloy identical to disc alpha. Crowd stirs, first audible intake of breath. A political delegate rises, what do you propose? Geologist answers, UNESCO Deep Sea Heritage Zone. International moratorium on commercial mining over the plateau until full survey. Economist counters, strategic metals, rare earths, billions at stake. Monk smiles and a civilization lost to greed once already. Lights dim, screen plays simulation, comet debris field intersecting Earth, 2032, confidence interval narrowing each month. Narrator voice overlays calm, faultless diction. Atlantis is not a trophy, it is a rehearsal. The pattern flourish, hubris, celestial reset repeats every few millennia. We stand at the brink of the next stanza. Silence longer than protocol allows. Finally, a 12-year-old prodigy from the front row, winner of a global essay contest, speaks into the hush. If they left a message in rings, maybe the next message is ours. What shape will we carve for people who live after the fire? Applause breaks like surf, uneven but growing. Decision forms in real time, a consortium, astronomers, coastal engineers, ritual scholars tasked to translate the legacy into planetary safeguards, expanded sky survey arrays, impact deflection tech, seawall upgrades, cultural memory vaults etched in synthetic sapphire. Conference adjourns at dawn. Delegates file out beneath a sky-flushing rose over Lisbon rooftops. In the lobby, print runs of the preliminary report already bear a new title. The Atlantic Convergence, Interim Synthesis on the 12.6 km Maritime Horizon. First paragraph ends with a sentence only 3 words long, plain enough for any future reader, stone, silicon, or neural cloud, to grasp. We remember now. Mid-ocean dusk, 14 months after the Lisbon conclave. A trimaran nicknamed Mnemosyne drifts over the Cadiz shelf, its carbon sail furled, running silent on hydrogen cells. Aboard, 9 students, 3 elders, no journalists, no dignitaries, just the first cohort of the Planetary Memory Fellowship. They carry no spades, only hollow tablets and seed glass wafers etched with data, orbital elements of the Taurid swarm, high-resolution bathymetry, archived myths in every language still spoken, and 2 that died last century. They're brief, encode the convergence for the next cycle. Deck loudspeakers hum a low chord, a voice, equal parts synthetic and human, guides them into circle. No titles tonight, no disciplines, only first names and the oldest rule of the sea, speak so the wind remembers. Ava, glaciologist, 22. Ice's memory that cracks. I've carved a 3D model of Greenland's melt pulse into sapphire. Buried deep, it will survive another Younger Dryas. Rafi, linguist, 19. I've built a language you can't forget, vector icons repeating like genetic code. Even if alphabets fade, the shapes will survive inside children's games. Elder Maku, Polynesian navigator, 68. I will sail the ring route Azores, Madeira, Canaries, Cape Verde, dropping carved driftwood at each gyre. The currents will teach the pattern to anyone who fishes. Juno, systems engineer, 25. I wrote a comet alert protocol that bypasses governments. When the Taurid node brightens, every phone will vibrate. Look up. Watch together. One by one they lay their contributions in the center, a seed vault of ideas rather than grains arranged inevitably in 5 concentric circles on the teak deck. Brass disc alpha, recovered from the seafloor, rests at the bullseye, its spiral labyrinth glowing under moonlight. No guards, no glass case, the object has come home to story. The oldest elder, hair silver as sea spray, addresses the youngest, a girl barely 10 whose drawing of ringed islands flaps in the breeze. We are not here to close a mystery. We are here to keep the door propped open for whoever walks the corridor next. He lifts a shard of pumice from Santorini, presses it into her palm. Stone remembers heat. Water remembers fall. Humans, he smiles, remember why. Drone camera pulls back, trimaran's deck lights sketch a glowing mandala on black water. Higher still, the Cadiz shelf unfurls, its buried rings faintly mapped by dotted navigation buoys, a maritime heritage zone no trawler may scour. Higher, the Atlantic arc glitters with new telescopes scanning the Taurid stream, their data pipelines public, unencrypted. A final narrator whisper threads through the stratosphere. Atlantis was never a warning etched in stone, it was a syllabus. Lesson 1, Civilization is temporary. Lesson 2, Memory is armor. Lesson 3, the test is open book, but only if the book survives the flood. Stars wheel, comet Enki, the Taurid parent, flares faint above the western horizon, right on schedule. On Mnemosyne's mast a laser blinks its encoded salutation toward the dust, a concentric pattern, 5 rings contracting to a single point, then blooming outward again, the signature of a species that has decided to remember forward. Chapter ends where the ocean began, horizon unbroken, story unfinished, echo waiting. Mid-ocean dusk, 14 months after the Lisbon conclave. A trimaran nicknamed Mnemosyne drifts over the Cadiz shelf, its carbon sail furled, running silent on hydrogen cells. Aboard, 9 students, 3 elders, no journalists, no dignitaries, just the first cohort of the Planetary Memory Fellowship. They carry no spades, only hollow tablets and seed glass wafers etched with data, orbital elements of the Taurid swarm, high-resolution bathymetry, archived myths in every language still spoken, and 2 that died last century. They're brief, encode the convergence for the next cycle. Deck loudspeakers hum a low chord, a voice, equal parts synthetic and human, guides them into circle. No titles tonight, no disciplines, only first names and the oldest rule of the sea, speak so the wind remembers. Ava, glaciologist, 22. Ice's memory that cracks. I've carved a 3D model of Greenland's melt pulse into sapphire. Buried deep, it will survive another Younger Dryas. Rafi, linguist, 19. I've built a language you can't forget, vector icons repeating like genetic code. Even if alphabets fade, the shapes will survive inside children's games. Elder Maku, Polynesian navigator, 68. I will sail the ring route Azores, Madeira, Canaries, Cape Verde, dropping carved driftwood at each gyre. The currents will teach the pattern to anyone who fishes. Juno, systems engineer, 25. I wrote a comet alert protocol that bypasses governments. When the Taurid node brightens, every phone will vibrate. Look up. Watch together. One by one they lay their contributions in the center, a seed vault of ideas rather than grains arranged inevitably in 5 concentric circles on the teak deck. Brass disc alpha, recovered from the seafloor, rests at the bullseye, its spiral labyrinth glowing under moonlight. No guards, no glass case, the object has come home to story. The oldest elder, hair silver as sea spray, addresses the youngest, a girl barely 10 whose drawing of ringed islands flaps in the breeze. We are not here to close a mystery. We are here to keep the door propped open for whoever walks the corridor next. He lifts a shard of pumice from Santorini, presses it into her palm. Stone remembers heat. Water remembers fall. Humans, he smiles, remember why. Drone camera pulls back, trimaran's deck lights sketch a glowing mandala on black water. Higher still, the Cadiz shelf unfurls, its buried rings faintly mapped by dotted navigation buoys, a maritime heritage zone no trawler may scour. Higher, the Atlantic arc glitters with new telescopes scanning the Taurid stream, their data pipelines public, unencrypted. A final narrator whisper threads through the stratosphere. Atlantis was never a warning etched in stone, it was a syllabus. Lesson 1, Civilization is temporary. Lesson 2, Memory is armor. Lesson 3, the test is open book, but only if the book survives the flood. Stars wheel, comet Enki, the Taurid parent, flares faint above the western horizon, right on schedule. On Mnemosyne's mast a laser blinks its encoded salutation toward the dust, a concentric pattern, 5 rings contracting to a single point, then blooming outward again, the signature of a species that has decided to remember forward. Chapter ends where the ocean began, horizon unbroken, story unfinished, echo waiting. The rings are mapped, the comet's tale retold, and the ocean, for now, lies quiet. Yet every discovery is only a doorway to the next question. If this journey through myth and memory has stirred your own sense of wonder, stay with us. New currents are already forming beyond the horizon and we'll navigate them together. If you felt the pull of Atlantis in these chapters, tap subscribe so you don't miss our next expedition and leave a comment below. Your reflections help shape the voyages to come. Thank you for listening, for questioning, and for keeping the story alive.